Hello, everyone, and welcome to the official podcast of BNI Success Link. It's September and it's back to school time. So guess the topic of this podcast. Top 3 tips for parents whose kids are back to school.
The official podcast of BNI Success Link. Your link to success.
Hello again, everyone. I'm your host, Rav Randiratha from Social Squares, and landing leads is where my business leads. Today's topic is the top 3 tips for parents whose kids are back to school. Being a parent myself, I know the pains of September and being back to school. So I have an expert with me, Jenny Michaelson, an expert parent coach. Jenny, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Rav. Great to be here.
Before we get into the weeds, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about parent coaching and what you do and how you help parents?
Absolutely. So my name's Jenny Michaelson. I have a company called True North Parent Coaching, and I really help parents find their way. And what I mean by that is there's lots of great information out there about parenting on the internet and in books, and a lot of it's great, but it doesn't always fit perfectly with your unique family situation. And so it's my job as a parent coach to bring a lot of that great stuff to you, but then tailor it to whatever challenges you might be facing as a parent. It's really wonderful, worthy, and rewarding work.
I can attest to that, given that I've worked with you. So thank you for all your help. And you're absolutely right. The information which is out there is good for somebody, not for us. So I'm excited about the topic today. So in your experience, what kind of issues come up during this time of the year?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's a lot. There's a lot of things that happen when kids go from being on a summer schedule to having to get back to school. So the first one is really transitions. Transitions can be hard for a lot of kids, and going from the routine of having a little bit more freedom, being able to go to bed a little bit later, and things being a little bit more relaxed, maybe a little extra screen time, to all of a sudden kind of shutting that down and getting into maybe more of a rigid routine that's necessary for school. So transitions can be rough. And one of those transition points is having to sit down and do homework, right? So kids are used to kind of being able, of all ages, right? They're kind of being used to being able to go out and play and do what they wish. And now for a lot of kids, and of course, not as much for the younger ones. And as you get older through school, it gets to be a little bit more and more of a burden, but all of a sudden you've got to come home and really focus on homework. And that could be rough.
Yeah, you hit the nail in the head with each one of those. And I can lament on that for a while, but let's talk about the topic of this podcast, the top 3 tips. So in your expert opinion, what are the top 3 things or tips which parents can do to actually at least get the homework pressure down?
Yeah, absolutely. And, homework's kind of a hot topic. Some people believe in it, some people don't believe in it, but I'd say for the most part, most kids have it. And so it's important to really think and be intentional about how to help your kids get the skills that they need to be sort of good homework stewards, so to speak, right? And I think I want to go with top 3.5 tips, and I'm going to start with tip 0.5, which is patience. It takes a little bit of time for the kids to get back into the routine of having to come home and do homework. So on the part of the parents, my top half tip is be patient. Takes a little bit of time. And now we'll jump into the real ones. So the first thing you want to do, and this really goes for the youngest, even to the oldest, is to really set up a homework friendly area at home. Make sure kids have a place that's well lit. For younger kids, you want to keep supplies on hand, things that are within reach. For older kids, you want to make sure that they have all the things that they need to complete the work that they need to do. And of course, in that area should be, as much as possible, a lack of distractions. And that's where the screen comes in. And that could be tricky because a lot of older kids actually need to use the screen to do their homework. And some of the younger kids just want the screen to do their homework, but they don't need it. Mm-hmm. And so it's really making sure you sort of really create like a physical space for doing the homework that has all the supplies you need, but also is lacking the supplies you don't need. And that's what I mean about the computer. So, yeah. And it's challenging, but.
That's a great tip.
Yeah, thanks.
Anything else you would like to
Yeah,
add?
absolutely. The second one is to just, in as much as it's possible, to set up a regular study time or a homework time. So for younger kids, maybe they benefit from coming home, having a snack, having a little bit of downtime, and then sitting down and finishing up whatever it is they need to do. And for older kids, there's a little more flexibility in there. They might have after school activities and after school sports, but just making sure that you discuss with them, like, when do you feel you do your best work? And so making sure that they think about setting it up as routine and making it a habit rather than just being really willy-nilly about everything. And then, probably the most important piece of homework advice that I have is to let the kids do their own work. It's really, really easy when your child comes home with a challenging assignment and you're tired and you've had a long day and there's some frustration and there may be some tears and there's some work avoidance because it's hard. And all of a sudden you're like, great, I know the best way out of this. And you're like, maybe you don't literally write it for them, but you're, giving them a few too many answers. Well, while that seems like the easiest way out.
Yeah, you're right. It's very tempting.
It is. If the kids are going to do the learning, they have to do the work. And so that's where the patience comes in. And it's just really important to remember to let the kids, feel good about whatever they accomplish in their homework. And the truth of the matter is, if there's an assignment that's too hard, that's really good feedback for their teacher, to put forth their best effort. And then to help the teacher know that, like, oh, this particular child doesn't understand, this particular lesson, and I need to make sure that individual child gets what they need. Or if homework all comes back and nobody knew what they were doing, that's great feedback for the teacher to know, oh, we need to revisit this lesson because there's something that didn't quite work out. So it's like it's a sort of like double bonus. One, you want your kids to do the learning, but you also want to provide that feedback both for your individual student, your child, and also for the whole class back to the teacher. And that can be really helpful. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of space to help out if things are hard in the adjustment.
Having young kids, I could relate to the challenges and how your tips would help. So thank you so much for those great tips. Now,
absolutely,
every situation is unique, right? Every kid is unique. What if there is a situation where parents are trying to apply the tips you gave, but they didn't work? What would you suggest to those parents?
Yes, it's such a good question, Rob, because that does happen. There are some households where homework is like the worst time of day. There are tears, there's resistance, there's procrastination, and I'm talking at all levels, all ages of kids. And it's really, really hard. It's really hard. And it's not the way learning is meant to be. And that might be an indication that it's time to look to maybe some outside resources. So I think the very first thing to do would be to contact the teacher and kind of let them know, hey, we're really struggling. And there's a disconnect between the learning that's happening at school and what the child's able to do at home, or they're just really not understanding. And maybe the teacher can shed some light on why this situation might be happening. You can start there. If it's not really a question of content understanding, but could be that they just need some extra time on task, they might need some tutoring, some extra resources that can be provided at school. And then, in some cases, there really are some learning issues that come out often through homework. And you discover that maybe your child needs some testing around attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or maybe is experiencing some learning challenges such as dyslexia, things that really need to be addressed. And so again, that would be reaching out to the school or to the teacher and figure out how you can get the resources needed to make those determinations. So sometimes homework is kind of a necessary red flag to kind of get you to that next step and get the support that you and your child both need.
Right. Those are some great suggestions. Thank you so much, Jenny. This was an awesome session, and I'm sure our audience, our parents, would love the tips you gave. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks, Ralph.
The official podcast of BNI Success Link. Your link to success.